This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode, I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 357 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Today we're talking about jobs in tourism. There are a lot of them and they're really varied. Let me firstly pay my respects to the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, where I'm recording this podcast today under grey, wintry skies. So, what do you think it would be like to work in the travel and tourism industry? I know that some of my listeners are working in this industry, so I hope we'll be able to hear from you and get some feedback and comments across the Thoughtful Travellers groups later. There are a lot of jobs in the travel sector. The World Travel and Tourism Council estimates 1 in 10 jobs across the world are in tourism, 10% of all jobs. If you stop for a second and think about the varying kinds of people that are part of your travels, I'm sure you could quickly name a dozen different careers or more. In today's episode, I've got 3 guests who work in very different parts of the tourism industry, as a tour operator, in the hotel space, and in marketing. So it's been fascinating to hear more about their work, and I think it's really interesting for us as travellers to have a bit more of a think about some of what's going on behind the scenes while we are travelling. Now, my first guest today is Suyash Keshari. Suyash is the founder of Ameliya Safaris, which runs safaris in India and across many countries in Africa. We actually chatted when he was back in New Delhi, and you might hear some of the unavoidable New Delhi street sounds in the background. I asked Suyash to describe a typical workday for him when he's out on safari.
I think there's always good and the bad sides of working in tourism industry, especially in wildlife tourism and safaris. The nature of the job is very, very, very hectic.
Yeah.
So I'll first tell you from my perspective of how my day looks like, the good moments and the bad. Let's start with the good. I am so lucky that every single day I get to see the sunrise and the sunset, the moonrise as well. So, think of it. Do you get to see the sunrise and sunset every single day?
I do not.
By that, I mean, not when you wake up and the sun is above the horizon. I get to see the sun below and crossing the horizon
Beautiful.
every single day, which is amazing. It's a new day every day, right? So you typically wake up at about 4 a.m. and, 4:30, 4:45, you have your strong cup of coffee, maybe something to eat. And then that's when you meet the guests for the safari. You brief them about the day, ask them what you're going to be looking for today, what can they expect from the day, make a game plan, and then everyone hops onto the Jeep and you start driving. And early morning, the air is fresh, it's crisp, there's a little chill in the air, and it feels like, right before dawn, it's completely quiet. There's not even one animal, one bird. It's only the air, the swishing of the leaves that you can hear. Then slowly to see the sun rising, to see the birds coming up into life, to see the insects buzzing, to see animals moving about. It just changes your life. It's a fresh perspective on life, especially when the sun hits you and you've been cold all this while and now you're suddenly feeling warm. It feels great. And then you typically start tracking for different animals. You stop every now and then, you observe different animals. For example, if cheetal deer, which is a spotted deer in India, we call them cheetal. If they see a tiger or a leopard in the vicinity, they'll make alarm calls like "Brr, brr, brr." And langur monkeys, which is the black-faced monkey in India, they make alarm calls like. So you're always hearing for those sounds to kind of know that, okay, is there an animal walking about? And that really helps you track beyond the pug marks, beyond the growls. And then you're typically spending a lot of time in tracking different animals, or just being next to them and observing their behavior. Is any one of the animals in estrus, for example, like with the cats, females are often in estrus, or for the males in deer or antelope, if they are also during their prime mating season. So what they'll do is they'll kind of go around and sniff different females, try to size up different males, So that is very, very cool to see. In 3, 4 hours, you come to a spot, you get off the vehicle, stretch your legs, and then you set up the breakfast on the bonnet of the vehicle. And that's amazing. You have fresh coffee, you have fresh tea, like a nice French press, you have breakfast, you talk a lot, and then you drive back to camp. So you come back to camp around 11 and with either very happy guests because they've seen the big cats or with very sad guests and tired guests. Okay.
Yeah.
And then that's where like kind of the hard part of the job also starts. Okay. What should be the lunch table conversations? How can you make sure that the guests are feeling upbeat? Because hey, you know what? Controlling the expectation is very, very important. And everyone is here to see that.
Of course.
Everyone wants to see a tiger. And it's not in your control sometimes because if tigers don't want to be found, they're not going to be found. Same with any big cats, any animal actually. Then you typically take a nap, have some lunch, and then after lunch, you leave for another safari, which ends at sunset. And again, it's always a challenge for me, which is my favorite, is the sunset or the sunrise. And in Africa, the sunset is always welcomed with a gin and tonic sundowner, which is one of my favorite times. And you always have a guest every now and then have a little too many gin and tonics, and they're feeling very bubbly on safaris, which is a lot of fun as well. Some people can get rowdy, so you have to control them. But most people are nice.
Right.
Most people are good enough. They're just there to enjoy, have a good time, not party, but have a little buzz on safari for them.
Fair enough.
And then you get back to camp by the campfire. The conversations begin, and then suddenly it's dinner time or like into the night at 12 a.m. and people are like, oh my gosh, I need to wake up in 3 and 4 hours. And then you have to repeat the whole thing again. So I love it, but it takes a toll on your body, which is the negative side, right? So all the good stuff is I get to make great friends. You're sharing core memories with people, you're sharing amazing wildlife encounters. So you're making core memories with people.
Yeah, that is nice.
Like they'll remember you for the rest of their life, which is amazing. But then the negative side is your body really, really suffers over time.
Yeah.
Lack of sleep, constantly sitting in the vehicles, which is like bumpy. This is all I'm doing the whole day.
Yeah.
My watch says I've taken 20,000 steps.
When you've just been sitting there driving along. Yeah.
Exactly. Every now and then, like it says, congratulations, you've climbed 10 flight of stairs. Congratulations, you've climbed another 10 flight of stairs. Like,
no.
So if hypothetically someone was to kick me, that's the distance I would have been kicked. 10 flights of stairs. So the vehicle has kicked me that far.
Exactly. Wow.
Yeah. So it's not good for your body, not neck, back, your joints and shoulders. And another thing is sometimes it's very cold. You're in 1 or 2 degrees Celsius, or it's raining, or it's extremely hot, 48, 49 degrees Celsius, and you're out in the heat and you're waiting. Sometimes it's 3, 4 hours.
Yeah.
And then the most difficult point is like when guests leave, who you've become really close friends with, and suddenly you're all alone and you just feel very lonely. And then you're eating alone, you're sitting by the campfire alone, and it just feels very lonely all of a sudden.
I can imagine. It was so interesting to hear about both the good and bad bits of this kind of work. And I was really touched that one of the bad bits was when his lovely guests leave and he feels lonely. I think that's the sign of a great guide, I reckon. Now, my next guest is John Roberts. Towards the end of last year, I recorded this chat with John. He's the Group Director of Sustainability and Conservation in the Minor Hotels chain. That's actually an overarching brand. I wasn't really aware, but it includes a lot of names you'll know like Anantara, NH Hotels, Avani, Oaks, and heaps more. So in other words, it's a lot of hotels. And I must confess, I'm usually a bit skeptical about whether hotel brands are actually trying to be sustainable or just they want us to think they are. So it was really extra interesting to hear about the work John's doing. And I kind of asked him for an honest assessment of what it's like leading the sustainability charge in the world of hotels.
It's a struggle. We do good things. We focus on what we can. I've been sustainability person for this side of the world minor hotel group now for quite a long time. And so therefore anything that hasn't been achieved it falls on my head as well.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm quite happy to sit here and take the plaudits for what we have done. But the middle of last year, basically, I got together a committee of people who were like-minded in the business, who I knew, who I'd spoken to and everything else, and a couple of people externally as well. And we sat through a committee and say, right, what we had as a hotel group some absolutely excellent hotels that are running on best practice. Never best practice, because we ain't there yet. You're never there. It's an unattainable goal. And we had some hotels that we really weren't reaching, and we have new hotels coming into the business. We're expanding really fast.
Right.
So we went all the way back to basics. Hopefully I'm operating outside this. I'm operating beyond the basics where I can in different places. So not hopefully, I am doing it. But we went back to basics. So exactly what are we missing? What do we actually have to have in place to be able to say that we're taking sustainability seriously?
Right. In every hotel in the group.
In every hotel in the group. And one of the key things is you've got to get a sustainability manager in place. And somebody has to be paid to do sustainability. Now, we haven't got that there yet, but it's a brand. It is a brand standard. So as of 1st of January 2025, and I can start going around and saying, well, where is it? This is what you have to have. Is it in your budget? All those other things. There were various other things like that. We came up with a list of about 200. What do we have to have in place? Sustainability manager, working on or around a formal food waste solution. I've got two. One, make sure that you have a laundry thing that says you are not going to do the laundry. Number two, make sure it's enforced.
Yeah,
literally.
exactly.
And I have it written in there as two, and I that's 2 of the 24.
Yeah, fair though.
Because it is universal, and it's not just our hotels. It's all hotels. Very rarely do you see it working properly. What else was there? Energy management systems, making sure that you set the thermostat at 25 and respect. But if the guest changes it after that, fine, you respect that for the rest of their stay. Making sure the TV is not on, because I mean, some of the energy management systems that, again, we had around the group, it varied everywhere. But you would go into a hotel, you'd stick your key back in the slot, the TV would come on.
Yes.
And okay, there was some debate, and pure sustainability, you wouldn't have that happen at all. But some debate, because we now have these fancy systems that say, welcome, Mr. Roberts. So, okay, it can be on for check-in. After that, we don't want to see the TV switch on automatically
exactly.
again.
I was just in a hotel on the weekend that kept turning it on every time I walked back into the hotel. This was in China, and it was like blaring. And I was like, stop, I don't need all this every time. And it didn't even tell me my name. It was useless. And
the first few times you go dunk 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 with the remote I've got here. And then the rest of it you just let it go, because it's white noise in the background.
Yeah.
So it's basic things like that. The other key one that we've made great strides on this year is certification and auditing, because that independent external auditing. And then ideally, if you pass the audit certification, GSTC, Global Sustainable Tourism Council standard. And GSTC actually are working on making that a bit tougher, and because now a lot of the standards almost all standards are recognized and very few are verified. And they are pushing for verification as well. Where we stand on that, I say not every standard's equal, and getting yourself verified is a large investment. But certainly there are entry-level GSTC standards that currently get you the same green mark. I mean, again, we come in leaps and bounds, because a year ago, I think, people like Booking.com, Google, and the online travel agents were relying on the hotel to report their standards and say, which certification do you have? Oh, we have this one. To be honest, I use that filter on Booking.com when I'm traveling around Thailand and staying in places where we don't have hotels or whatever. And they were fairly good, but there were a few greenwashes going on. Whereas now Booking.com and several of the other online travel agents they start using a service called B Corps. So the certification bodies now report to B Corps.
Right.
And so that's verified there.
Third party.
So it's third party verification, exactly.
Rather than a hotel saying, yes, of course we've got all these things.
Then, we are going to get it renewed. We just haven't done it yet. And all those other things, right?
Sorry, you're off the list.
Exactly that. So that's working really well. And we've made, actually, the online travel agents have made a big difference in this, because I've been pushing, and it has been a brand standard, and I've been pushing certification since 2008. We've been pretty good at it. But there have been gaps where people have just said we've seen the reports that say 78% of people will pay more for sustainable accommodation, but show us the increase in sales or the increase in rate, and it hasn't been there. So if you're more business minded, you've been asking, and you can say, okay, we did for a while have a nice graph that said certified hotels were actually operating more efficiently and saving you money. Yeah. But again, a certain management style will say, well, why do you need certification? Just do it anyway, which happens in everything. So it's your fault as the manager not being able to enforce these things. Whereas, as we said earlier, actually having one of the things that really helps a manager enforce the rules is having an external manager coming and auditing yourself once a year. So that's really helpful.
Exactly.
To me, the really interesting thing, because as I say, we've been doing this since 2008 with Green Growth 2050, is that more and more of our hotels were getting platinum around the world. And I was starting to think, well, this is getting too easy. Maybe we need to start looking at another standard because people are getting this. We've certainly I've been talking with Wayne, the guy who runs Green Growth 2050. Let's have a
Platinum
star. Platinum Plus, exactly. That's immediately revoked if someone spots a single-use plastic bottle anywhere near your property or something like that.
Yes. I have another part of my chat with John saved to share in a future episode about how they've been tackling the issue of food waste in their hotels. Super interesting, actually. I was surprised to learn a lot. And so listen out for that in a future episode. But I was really pleased to hear someone so passionate about sustainability who's in a position where he can really influence what happens in hundreds of hotels. So that was heartwarming indeed. My final guest today is Jamie Byrne, and Jamie is in another entirely different part of the tourism sector with his career. And I chatted about how he got there. He had started out with an acting degree and had an enjoyable stint teaching English in Paris, but then he found himself wanting to take another direction in his career.
I decided, okay, the acting degree is quite irrelevant for most jobs, so let's get another degree under the chin. And the backpacking thing, just thought, what do I love? I love travel. Okay, easy. Master's in tourism management. So I did that with the intention, like I said, about wanting to learn more about backpacking and the hosteling culture. But
where did you study this master's?
This was in Bournemouth, in my hometown. It's just one of the best universities in the world for tourism. At least the academic league tables say so. Very quickly, I discovered all of these issues within tourism that require some urgent attention in terms of managing things better, communicating things better. You know, you hear these horrific stories about problems in the cruise industry or with airlines or exploitation, leakage, all of these things where it feels like tourism is a very exploitative industry a lot of the time. I've always been very interested in environmentalism and climate change and things like that. So I think it quite naturally evolved as I learned more of these issues into, I want to pursue sustainable tourism and getting into that as a real meaningful career. So my thesis, I wrote that on the attitudes of carbon offsets of Chinese air travelers, which is very quite niche and specific.
So interesting, though.
I did my master's. I finished that. I came out the other side, actually right in the middle of COVID, which was great timing to find a career in tourism.
So it's terrible timing, you poor thing.
Banging my head on the table.
Oh, no.
Oh, God, I've made the same mistake with another degree, just going down the toilet. Not again. But I did find an opportunity initially working with a charity that helps people with disabilities find travel options and solutions. That's charity Enable My Trip that I still work with now. I sort of progressed from a volunteer to being a trustee with them and advising on their marketing strategy.
Awesome.
So that was my first role in tourism, albeit volunteer, but that experience led to working with a small luxury independent travel agency in Bournemouth in the UK. And I'm not going to mention them or name them, but the organizations there, the marketing strategy, it was not great. You know, after doing my master's and things and learning all about the different, how you should run a business and how to do marketing, I would ask a lot of the time, who's our audience? Who are we serving? What's our product? What makes us different from everyone else? And I'd often get the response that, we're for everyone.
You can't market to everyone. Marketing to everyone is marketing to no one.
Yeah, exactly. So one day we'd be selling luxury round the world cruises. The next day we'd be doing holiday cottage stays in Scotland. The day after that we'd be doing LGBTQ friendly tours in Malta. The day after that it would be student volunteer experiences in Papua New Guinea or something like that.
Goodness.
Like screaming. So that came to an end within a year or so. But again, that gave me more marketing experience. I was managing, Facebook ads and doing social media things. That eventually led to working with a travel marketing agency, which was an amazing experience. I loved that job, getting to work with over 50 clients around the world, managing their campaigns, creating them, brainstorming, having the back and forth, with them, discussing what's working, what's not working. Yeah, that was a real eye-opener and great learning curve to be working with all of these different brands, from tour operators to accommodations and attractions. That was
That's cool.
really interesting time there. And then eventually, after another year or so there, I mentioned it in a LinkedIn post. I used to say, "Oh, I left the travel marketing agency," but I can now, after coming out, let's say, on LinkedIn, I was fired. I did something wrong, had some disagreements, but I was kicked out the door, which is fine because, like I said, on LinkedIn, it was actually the best thing to happen to me because it gave me that sudden like, oh, Jesus, right. Okay, I need to figure something out, something now. And for a few months before I'd been fired, I was actually thinking about getting into freelancing, developing my own path, because I always wanted to get back to sustainable tourism, but I had to get the experience first. The marketing experience of the agency I felt like I know what to do now. I know how this process works and how to do it. And I've got the knowledge of sustainable tourism and how to help people, how to make things better. So all of a sudden, when I was fired, I was like, right,
got to do it now.
To get on that freelancing horse. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
wonderful.
That was, again, although the masters, of course, and the marketing agency were huge learning experiences. I've been doing freelancing now since November 2023, and I've learned more than I have in my entire life. When you're building your own website, when you're learning WordPress, when you're learning how to create these impactful posts on social media, when you're creating documents and resources for the broader industry, like the Guide to Responsible Tourism Marketing, which I created over a few months as this free resource to help tourism businesses that want to be better to communicate more effectively. I just want to make things clearer and simple for people in terms of marketing. It doesn't have to be difficult, but you just have to have a good strategy, a good plan in mind about stop thinking about what you want to put out there as the business, but how are you serving your customer? What does your customer want? So I spoke recently about the 95-5 rule in marketing, which is basically this principle that 95% of the time, your target audience is not ready to book your experiences or buy your product. Only 5% are in the market. And I see so many tourism businesses on their social media pages, on their websites, just pumping out offer after offer, like 3-night stay in Bali, Ubud, and for sustainable tourism businesses, I think if you're doing things right, the storytelling is so easy. So rather than focusing on putting out these offers, focus on creating a sustainable, long-term, double meaning there with the sustainable thing for these businesses, but make your platform something that's telling a story and sharing, what's the local wildlife like? What are the local cultures and traditions? What's the history like? Because when people notice you and they see these interesting stories and knowledge that you have to share, eventually when they are ready to take that trip, you're hopefully going to be the first one that they think of.
Exactly.
Even if they do see a better offer, not a better offer, but let's say a cheaper offer with another business, you're already that seed in their conscience and thinking you've already built that trust and confidence and you know what you're talking about. Yeah. So maybe marketing it's nice to be clever, but it's better to be clear and have purpose and to stick to your values and principles. And that's something that I not only encourage my clients to do, to use this triple bottom line approach of people, planet, and profit. You can't run a business without having profit. But how are you balancing that? How are you also benefiting local communities? How are you benefiting the environment? What are you doing to make tourism better? How are you reducing the bad stuff and making the good stuff better?
I love Jamie's interesting career trajectory, and he's full of wise words. We actually met initially because of his brilliant LinkedIn posts. So if you are running a tourism business yourself, definitely look him up. I'm sure you'll learn a lot from him, as I have. Anyway, to summarize, working in the tourism industry is varied. There are so many different kinds of jobs, and I find, really interesting to hear about the insider perspective, and I hope you did too. So thanks so much for listening to episode 357 of the Thoughtful Travel podcast. Big thanks to my guests. I started off chatting to Suyash Keshari from Ameliya Safaris, ameliyasafaris.com. That's Ameliya. John Roberts, of course, is the Group Director of Sustainability and Conservation at Minor Hotels. More info at minorhotels.com. And lastly, marketing superstar and sustainability champion, Jamie Burr. And Jamie's site is jamieburr.com. And I do recommend, finding him on LinkedIn if you're interested in more of his insights as well. I would love to hear from other people who work in the tourism sector. What kind of jobs do you do and how do you feel about them? Do come and chat in either the Facebook or LinkedIn groups for Thoughtful Travellers. I'll leave the links in the show notes, but just search for Thoughtful Travellers on those platforms. Don't forget, also, we have the Thoughtful Travel Substack, thoughtfultravel.substack.com. Lots of interesting posts there. All of these links and more you'll find in the show notes. And for today, they are at notaballerina.com/357. And if you are following me in any of those places or on Instagram, etc., you will have seen this week that I've been celebrating finally reaching 1 million downloads. So if you haven't seen that anywhere, you are one of the listeners who has contributed to that. So a massive thank you. It's been really exciting celebrating the big 1 million milestone. So as always, thank you so much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.